Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rich Brenza, and it is my honor as Regional Director to present this year's recipient of the William D. Reynolds Award. The William D. Reynolds Award is conferred on an alum doing exceptional work with the youth for the betterment of their quality of life. This year's winner is said to be energetic, competent, humble, and faith-filled. He has served as an English teacher, a coach, principal, and president of Bishop Fian. Under his leadership, the school has flourished with academic excellence, service opportunities, through campus ministry, and a rich spiritual traditions such as retreats, regular school masses, and reconciliation. He and his wife of 45 years have raised 4 outstanding children. Please acknowledge this year's William D. Reynolds Award recipient, Mr. Chris Serva.
Good afternoon. Receiving the William D. Reynolds Award was unexpected but greatly appreciated. And thank you to the Notre Dame Alumni Office for being the facilitator for such an honor, and a special thank you to Bishop Fian High School parent Joe Corkery, who took the time to nominate me for this award. I'd like to dedicate my remarks to 3 people tonight. First, to my deceased mother, Priscilla Servant, who was widowed at the age of 30 and left to raise 3 young children, 3 years, 2 years, and 6 months old. And like many of her contemporaries, my mother lived through the Great Depression and World War II and was a card-carrying member of a group that has become known as the Greatest Generation. Individuals who, when faced with difficulties and personal tragedy, suppressed their self-pity, buckled their chin straps, and did what they had to do. My mother was one such person. Second, I want to acknowledge the long-ranging influence that Father Ted Hesburgh had upon me when I was a student here from 1966, 1970, and beyond. And finally, I'd like to thank the students from Bishop Fian High School, where I worked for 44 years, for inspiring me every day to set the bar higher. Several of those students are here tonight with the principal from that school, President Tim Sullivan, and his daughter. I'd ask they would just simply stand to be recognized, if they would. Thank you. First, congratulations to Gary. I told Gary before that Father Griffin was, when I was here, was a rector of a dorm and ever knew him quite well. If you can for a moment, Gary has, to say he had a global perspective would be an understatement. Now I'm going to take you down to a small town of 28,000 people in Attleboro, Massachusetts, a place that could be in any state, and hopefully you'll see some parallels here. I understand that my recognition today is centered around what I did for Bishop Fian High School and its students over a 44-year career, and I've been asked to talk briefly about that. And instead of telling you just what I did, I think it would be far more interesting to hear why and how I did it. One of the first major decisions in my life occurred in 1972 following my discharge from Vietnam, when I declined my acceptance to attend the Notre Dame Law School, and I chose to teach English at my high school alma mater, Bishop Fian High School in Attleboro, Massachusetts. For the better part of the next 29 years, I gave my heart and soul to teaching and coaching the students of Bishop Fian, and I loved every minute of it. I was told early and often that teaching in a Catholic school was not a job, but a vocation. And a public school teaching friend of mine said it best. Teachers in a public school teach for the superintendent. Teachers in a Catholic school teach for God. A second life-changing decision for me occurred in 2001. I was in my 29th year of teaching at Fian when our principal told me that he was leaving and he wanted me to apply for his job. At first, I was reluctant. I loved the school and I wanted to help, but 2 of my children at the time were students at Fian, and as it was, having your dad teach English is one thing, having your dad be the principal is a whole different story. I further rationalized my hesitation because I love teaching, and besides, I had no formal training in being an administrator. What eventually proved to be the catalyst for me applying occurred when one of my friends handed me a book and said, "Read this." That book, God, Country, and Notre Dame, is Father Ted Hesburgh's autobiography and published in 1990. I began reading that night. Interestingly, I read in chapter 4, entitled Leading, that Father Hesburgh also had doubts when he was about to be appointed president of Notre Dame back in the 1950s. And I quote, "Our student body had doubled, our facilities were inadequate, Our faculty quite ordinary for the most part. Our graduates were loyal and true, but lacking in intellectual curiosity. Our academic programs were outdated and our fundraising non-existent. Feehan was no Notre Dame. Far from it. But there were some similarities. Our nickname was the Shamrocks. Our mascot was a leprechaun. We were a Catholic school, and we too had aging facilities, a complacent faculty, outdated academic programs, and non-existent fundraising. In that same chapter on leadership, Father Ted outlines his vision of a greater Notre Dame. To be great, a university needs a great faculty, a great student body, and great facilities. And to accomplish this requires money and a great spirit that is inspirational and cohesive. Inspired by Father Ted's words and our outgoing principal's encouragement, I started to think maybe I could make a difference. I was vested. My mom contributed to the campaign to build the school. I was a graduate, as were my siblings, and I had worked at the school for 29 years. With these thoughts in mind, I made the decision to apply to become principal and was chosen shortly thereafter. Making the decision to lead was the easy part. Experience had taught me that real change and inspirational visions require hard work, time, resources, patience, and divine providence. I knew very little about school administration, but I knew that successful organizations had strong advisory boards, which we did not have at Bishop Feehan. So I formed a board made up of alumni, parents, and friends from a range of personal and professional backgrounds, and the one common thread among them was they all believed in Catholic education. At our first meeting, I shared Father Ted's vision of a successful school with them, which provided a springboard to identify and prioritize goals specific to Bishop Feehan. This is commonly known as a strategic plan, which we also did not have at Feehan. So I formed a subcommittee, enlisted the services of a former Feehan teacher, now Vice President of Mission for Salve Regina University, and we created Feehan's first strategic plan. Not surprising, one of our first major goals in the plan was, as Father Ted identified, building a great faculty. All our faculty were good people. They were all committed to the cause of Catholic education, but some of them had become complacent and needed to recharge their batteries for their students, for themselves, and to rekindle their passion for teaching, which brought them to the school. My academic vice principal had previously been a student-teacher evaluator at Providence College, so she developed an enhanced classroom observation and evaluation program, to which we added tuition reimbursement for teachers who earned postgraduate degrees. Keep in mind, at that moment when we offered that bonus, we did not have the money to finance this incentive because the teachers paid for the classes up front, and we did not reimburse them until they finished each course. We had several months to find the resources to pay them. Yes, we were winging it. Secondly, we needed to attract and enroll great students. We were modestly under-enrolled with 850 students for 900 seats, but in those years, we took every person who applied. We felt that we needed our standards, to increase our standards for admission, and not at the expense of de-emphasizing our Catholic mission. That year at the annual open house, we had a record number of 1,200 students and parents attend. When it came my turn to speak, I told the parents that our teachers would challenge their child to be all that they could be, and I personally would guarantee that they would reach that potential. Now the pressure was on me, and the pressure was on the faculty. I then emphasized the importance of faith and stated, we are a Catholic school and we are not a Catholic school in name only, and we don't apologize for that. And if you want your child to attend Bishop Feehan, you must have an active faith in parish life, and if you don't presently have one, you need to develop one. And if parents wanted their child to attend Feehan and increasing their faith commitment was necessary to make that happen, they would meet that standard. I then told the parents that their primary objective might be to get their son and daughters into Harvard University, but our primary objective at Bishop Feehan was to get them into heaven first. And then I paused and added, and these two goals can be compatible at Bishop Feehan High School, and they have been. After the open house ended, I asked one of my teachers, what'd you think? He said to me, you might have been a little bit too strong on the faith piece, to which I replied, we'll soon find out, won't we? 3 weeks later, we had over 500 students take our entrance exam, 200 more than the previous year, and 2 weeks later, 470 of that 500 applied for 225 seats in the freshman class. That first year, I learned a valuable lesson. My fear of raising the bar high at open house was unfounded. Parents want schools with standards that are clearly defined and upheld. The higher we raised the bar, the more the students and the parents wanted to be part of what we had to offer. Say what you mean and mean what you say. The biggest and most challenging part of our transformation, however, was the need for financial resources, without which change would be very difficult. I started the annual fund, and I was calling an average of 40 to 50 alumni a day to enlist their support. Although we were making progress, we realized this was going to be a much longer process unless we were more aggressive. Desperation prompted me to ask one of my board members who worked in the philanthropic field, is there any way that you can determine a person's wealth and means and giving potential? He proceeded to show me some public resources on the internet. I then identified several alumni and parents who I knew well, and that research suggested they were capable of making a large gift, which at the time to Bishop Fian was $5,000 or $10,000. One such person was a 1978 graduate living in San Jose who was the chief software engineer at a company in Silicon Valley, and his company was worth millions. It's on the net. The more research I did, the more it became clear that the grad had the potential for a lot more than $5,000 or $10,000. And my board confirmed my analysis and suggested that I ask him for $1 million. That's very easy for them to suggest because they weren't doing the asking. I was. I don't know, there may be many people in this room who have asked people for $1 million, but I had never done that in my life. Frankly, this was way beyond my experience, but they continued to encourage me, saying, what's the worst thing that could happen? To which I replied, and he was a student I had a great rapport with, offending him and hearing him say no. And they corrected me and said, no, that's only the second worst thing that could happen. I said, well, what's the worst thing that happened? The worst thing could happen, he could say no problem, which means you didn't do your research and you should have asked him for a lot more. And that's a true story. Slowly, I started to convince myself that the bigger ask was the way to go. I flew to California, met the grad of this company. I started to tell him what I wanted to do at Fian. As I sat there, the more intimidated I became when suddenly he interrupted me and said, Chris, like most people do in these conversations, exactly what are you looking for? What do you want? To which I replied, $1 million. Immediately, I wanted to apologize for being so bold, but I had been coached once I asked, be quiet. And again, it's a true story. I knew nothing. Finally, after what seemed like a proverbial eternity, he broke the silence and said, I had a figure about $250,000 in mind. How does that work out? A smile slowly came across my face. Was I disappointed? How could I be? This was a great deal more than the $5,000 or $10,000 that I was going to originally ask him for. I thanked him profusely. He proceeded to tell me that he would transfer 2,000 shares of his company's stock worth $250,000 to Fian. Little did I know that the best was yet to come. Upon my return to Massachusetts, my board advised me, although the market was strong, it was 2,000, it was volatile, and that we needed to sell that stock immediately. It was the 4th of July week, so it took several days to liquidate the stock, but by the time it sold, the stock had split, and when we sold it, it was worth $700,000. Asking for $1 million was the right thing to do. That gift was both providential and transformational. It was the springboard for the vision at Bishop Fian to become a reality. We were now able to make tangible changes, and the more improvements we made, the more success we experienced. Keep in mind, giving money to a Catholic high school, not a Catholic university, a Catholic high school, is an uncommon practice for most Catholic high school graduates, including ours. Why? Because no one ever asks them. 5 years later, in 2006, I experienced another major turning point when the superintendent of our diocese called to tell me he was changing Fian to a college-type president-principal model and that I would be the first president. I was told my job description was threefold. Sustain the mission of the school. When I attended Bishop Fian, it was all religious teaching the school. There were no religious people by actual formal designation in the school. Secondly, develop a long-range strategic plan, and today, as most of us know, that's 5 or 10 years, if you're lucky. And the third part is raise the money to make those plans happen. And that's a lot tougher than it looks. My faculty gave me a hat after the first year, and I was president and said, my job's secure, and on the back of my hat it said, because nobody wants it. Asking people for money is not an easy thing to do. During those next 10 years, we were blessed with continued financial support, which led to more progress. Among the many things we were able to do was reduce class size to 20 or less, install a world language lab, one of 100 in New England, refurbish our science labs, replace our heating system in every window in the school, transform an unoccupied convent made of 44 bedrooms to a state-of-the-art technology center and library, upgrade the school's auditorium with seats, air conditioning and lighting, expand our locker rooms, add a 4,000 square foot fitness center, renovate the school's gymnasium, replace our tennis courts, install a synthetic turf field, and resurface our running track. All the while keeping tuition affordable and doubling financial aid. Bishop Fian has the lowest price tuition in New England for high school, 9 through 12. Over my 16 years as head of school, there were times when the national economy and scandals within our church leadership cast a long shadow over all we're trying to achieve. At these times when things looked darkest, I drew motivation from the inspiration of my mother's struggle, Father Ted's vision, and the students' goodness and appreciation. Now, almost 20 years since the day I became principal, Bishop Fian's enrollment is strong, 1,075, with 2 applicants for every seat in the school. The physical plant's renewed and attractive, the tuition is among the most affordable in New England, and the school has become a leader among its peers in technology, excellence, and most importantly, service. There are many Fian stories throughout this country. Simply stated, success at a Catholic school is not the result of me, it's the result of we. Dedicated teachers, generous parents, supportive alumni, diligent students, strong administrators, and divine providence. It may seem to be about me, but make no mistake it's about we. I'd like to end with a prayer from the late Bishop Oscar Romero that captures the essence of the work that Catholic school servants do throughout the country, like Bishop Fian. And Archbishop Romero, those of you who have heard this before, did not write this. This is actually written for a bishop. That basically, if you will, it was Father Cardinal John Dearden, that actually read this, if you will, and gave this. So I'm going to read just a couple of brief excerpts. It helps now and then to step back and take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in a lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it's a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers. We are not master builders. We are ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future, not our own. I'd like to thank Dolly Duffy and the Notre Dame Alumni Office for sponsoring this award, honoring me as a recipient, allowing me to share the story of Bishop Fian High School. Thank you to those relatives, students, friends who came today to celebrate Donna with me, particularly Elise, my wife of 45 years, whose support and faith in what I do has been a constant. Go Irish, go Shamrocks. Thank you.